Hey guys, super consistent YouTuber streamer man here. Welcome to what will hopefully become the first in a series of videos pertaining to RTA, trying to teach people how to get into RTA. In this video, we'll be covering, as the title suggests, how to make your first RTA team. In the series, we'll be going over 101 being selecting your first team, 102 being your first RTA team and how to build them, stats you need, 103 being your winning your first RTA match, which you've probably already done RTA, you probably already have an idea on how to do RTA, but hopefully at least some of you will find this useful in some kind of way. Now, before we go over these, there are several things to note. The reason why assessing your box is so important is that PvP is mainly Nat 5 dominated. While there are a handful of meta free-to-play monsters, these are very far and in between nowadays. Typically these will have a Nat 5 counterpart who generally just does their job better. However, with that being said, you can't just pick all the Nat 5s you have and with no synergy and just expect to win, right? So let's jump into the types of units. Essentially, they are broken down into two categories, right? Your support units and your threat units. Support units are going to be those that give you cleanse, that AoE strip, that control, attack bar, heal, or prevent death. So that's going to be things like your Triana, things like Chiwu, Fran, Lulu. Then you have threat units, which do either control or damage. The reason why we see strippers like Chiwu as a support, but more can sometimes be, a threat depending on how much damage you put onto him. Like Moore and Vigor, like they can be a threat depending on their ruins, their artifacts, and they're great units to take into like a Leica, right? But for the most part, you can tell from their kit what they're going to do and how much damage they're really going to do to you, right? At higher level, of course, most units are going to be tanky as hell for no reason. They're going to be super fast, super tanky, do a lot of damage, and that it's a completely different animal. Right now what we're talking about is like C3 and below. Guardian level is a completely different animal altogether. So the reason why assessing like the types of units you have is important is because you want at least 3 threat units. So there's a few specific comps like the Tableau Jamire, the Stet comp, which is a cleave that only requires you to bring 2 dedicated threats because of how Jamire, Wymie, Dimey damage thing, right? I mean, most of us already know how that works. You get first turn, then you get second turn, and then you get third turn, and yeah. It brings a lot of damage, even though you only have 2 threats. So, bruiser teams can usually get away with bringing only 3 supports, but you really need to bring high threat units. Like, you'll see things like Molong, you'll see things like Jaeger, you'll see things like a Cardinal sometimes. But you need to bring stuff that brings kill potential, right? You can't just bring 3 supports and then 2 units that offer no damage at all, right? So, now let's cover comps. I typically categorize comps, well, especially at below Guardian level, into 3 major categories: Bruiser, Control Cleave, and Cleave. At higher ranks, things are much different, as we said previously. So you'll see a shift from comps to core units and counter picks. But let's dive into Bruiser comps. Essentially, these teams will give up their first turn to allow their units to have overall more stats, especially a lot more stats than like speed teams, like cleave teams. And usually they can out-sustain their enemy. These teams are usually centered around like 2 premium units. So a couple of those pairings are like Molong Icarus, Leo Ragdoll, or Ryu Molly. These are just a few that are commonly used. You'll see free-to-play units like Lulu or Vigor used alongside these, but the previous ones are just like the hardest ones to obtain, the backbone of the team. So these teams usually consist of 2 very strong threat units, 2 sustain, and a counter pick, for the most part. The strongest drawback on this team is that it really relies heavily on RNG, like violent and resistance to wind, but sometimes it works really well. It works really well, especially against, against cleave teams when you have high resistance on most of your units and everyone's really tanky, and you know you can last outside of first turn. If you can survive first turn, you've won against cleave teams, and that's it. Control cleaves, a little bit different, which that's what we're moving on to now. With these teams, the control cleave comps, you'll find that these teams are super monster dependent, but the ruin requirements can vary a lot. Like, you can go for like a first turn control team, but then you need a lot of speed, right? But it's a lot easier to go like decently fast on like a violent set and still be able to win. You do not have to take first turn. That's the most important thing about control cleave teams, is you have to know how to counter pick. You have your core units. These kinds of teams will get you used to like high level gameplay in like Guardian. You know, you have your core units, let's say, so like the 5 most commonly used units are like Oki, Jogun, Chunpeng, Cardinal, and more. Those 5 units, like, you want at least 3 of those, and then like 2 counter picks in like every draft that you pick. I mean, in order to really be successful, you want at least 3, but if you have all of them, you'll be in an even better place. Like, you add a Sierra in there, you have 2 leads. With your Moore, you have your Sierra, you have 2 strips, you bring 1 more CC, and you've pretty much won, as long as you can take either first turn or cut in between first turn. While these teams do not bring a lot of sustain, they control the enemy teams pretty well. As long as most of your things land, you won't be taking a lot of damage because you're going to be just CCing the hell out of them. So the biggest drawback is that it relies heavily on accuracy checks and a good stat and speed spread, you know? You can't be just ridiculously fast with 2 HP and expect to win, because then literally everything will kill you, right? So now, lastly, let's go over the comp that's probably the hardest one to ruin, and also maybe the hardest one to obtain the units for: cleave comps. Well, like, these teams, especially first turn cleave comps, you almost always have to take first turn. Like, it's near impossible to really win after they've either cut you or taken first turn from you, because that allows them to do a lot of things to your body that you do not want done. So, especially in the current meta, like, the most important thing is either having a really fast booster or a lot of strips with like control units, right? So generally these teams revolve around a lot around like AoE or single target nukers. So you'll see things like the Jamai or Bastet Tableau comp that will run units like Lucian, like Oberon, like Kali. It's a great team. Does a lot of damage, but is very speed focused, very speed focused. So a couple of these of the teams that you'll see will be things that pair well with like Chiwu and more. So you'll see like Poseidon, you'll see Belenus, you'll see Savannah, and then things that pair great with boosters that give a lot of buffs, you'll see Kali, Lucian, Oberon. The downside of these comps is the really heavy reliance on speed, and a lot of boosters do not have high base speed. If you don't delete one of the enemy's units off the playing field, you're in a very bad situation. At least 1 or 2 in order to really be able to secure that victory. So without enough damage to control, then like high threat units like Cardinal or Recon the enemy team can pretty much kill you by themselves. Like, I've been soloed by them a couple times. Well, so now lastly, hopefully I haven't overloaded you too much with information, but let's quickly go over how to pick your own comp, right? So you really want to look at not only what nat 5s you have, but what ruins you have. The 3 different comps that I've gone over allow you to really determine like what kind of team you want. Like you could go bruisers, but don't focus on speed. You want, if your ruins are high efficiency, don't go cleave comp. Like it's really important to take into consideration both your ruins and the monsters that you have. Like if you look on the screen, this is my alt account. I've been farming for a little bit. It's a very early game account, but say if I wanted to get into RTA, right? I'd take a look at my monsters. These are the nat 5s that I have on this account right now. We have units that can take first turn, but then we have 2 very strong units that can take second turn just fine and be fine. Tian Lang pairs well with a second turn team as well. Like we have Chimera, who's a control unit who can cleave, but we wouldn't really try to build a team around just the one strong unit. We want to build around what we have more strong units of, right? So I would probably go something like something like Triana, something like Fran, Lulu, something slow, something bruisery, call out a day. But like the ruins that I have right now, there's not much of them, but they're all, you know, decent efficiency, so I can do that if I wanted to. This account is not ready for that, but yeah, hopefully this helps at all. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. If you found this useful, please consider liking or subscribing to my channel, as it'll help me make more videos in the future. If you want to catch me live on Twitch, I'm on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 PM. Or if you need help on Summoners War, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. My links are down in the description below. I'm out. Peace.